Hi, everyone. People are still coming in, but I think we'll start since we have two presentations. And I'd like to welcome you to the second night of lectures by this year's Emerging Voices. As many of you know, especially those of you who were here last week and heard a version of this introduction, each year the Architectural League selects 8 emerging practices based in the United States, Canada, or Mexico through an invited, juried portfolio competition that recognizes talented individuals and firms with distinct design voices that have the potential to influence the disciplines of architecture, landscape architecture, and urbanism. We are now in the 36th season of Emerging Voices, which is pretty exciting to us. If you would like to learn more about recent winners and the full list of past Emerging Voices, please check our website. And if you want in-depth coverage of the first 30 years of the series, we published a book a few years ago that both shows their work and has some essays that really break things down by the decade, actually by 5-year time periods, and talk about design during different eras since 1981. And then further information about this year's winners can be found on the website. As I mentioned, there's some features. We're publishing the first 4 this week that are interviews with the firms. Videos from these lectures will be up. And then you also can look at the Architect's newspaper. They're hard copies upstairs, and you can read it online for their features about each of the winners. This series is made possible through the generosity of the program's sponsors. On behalf of the League, I'd like to thank our principal supporters, Elise Jaffe and Jeffrey Brown, and then additional support for this series is provided by public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council, by the Next Generation Fund of the Architectural League, which is an annual fund that's supported by a group of past winners of both this program and the League Prize program. And then architectural leagues are also supported in part by public funds from the New York State Council on the Arts with the support of Governor Andrew Cuomo and the New York State Legislature. And by the way, you can go to our website to see the full list of jurors for the competition. We had both a national jury who reviewed the first round and then a local jury who reviewed the portfolios in the second smaller round of the competition. One of those jurors, Yolande Daniels, who's a past emerging voice herself, will introduce tonight's speakers.
Hi, everyone. So I'm very happy to be here as one of the jurors and a past Emerging Voices winner from 2010 with my partner Sunil Bald and Studio SUMO to introduce today's Emerging Voices practices. So the 2 practices that I will present tonight are Freeland Buck and Waechter Architecture. Who's going first? Okay. Thank you. Okay. Ben Waechter is a registered architect in the states of Oregon and Washington. He's located on the West Coast. We kind of have a West Coast / East Coast event tonight. He's a graduate of the University of Oregon, Eugene, and is a faculty member at the School of Architecture at the University of Oregon. Projects by Waechter Architecture, including Furioso Vineyards, Milwaukee Way, the Society Hotel Bingen, Sawtooth Apartments, Slender House, Red House, Pavilion House, Oakley House, Tower House, Garden House, JT, Cape Cod House, have all received numerous awards, including several AIA Northwest and Pacific Region Design Awards, AIA Northwest and Pacific Region Honor Awards, AIA Portland Honor Awards, AIA Portland Merit Awards, AIA Portland Citations, and Residential Architect Magazine Custom House Design Award and Merit Award, and the Architizer A+ Award. I thought it was kind of better to group everything in blocks by projects and awards so that you could just, it's quite a long list, and just to see it. Waechter Architecture upholds clarity as a value for the experience of space in order to understand the internal logic and spatial organization of forms. For Waechter Architecture, the power and logic of building forms is derived from within, and architectural forms are developed and designed as to withstand instability. The buildings are pragmatic responses that aspire to a programmatic and formal clarity where concepts are consolidated into a clear diagram and spatial sequences. Here, the definition of beauty lies in distilling the essence of form. The working method relies on testing each design through an analytical process that seeks to reveal organizational alignments and discrepancies, and through developing form in physical studies and models in a process that evokes the tactile origins of architectural study and form making. Waechter Architecture presents a body of work shaped by continual study and formal experimentation through retrospective and tactile editorials and adjustments that generate the integration of building concepts and building forms into interwoven materials, spaces, and systems as an individual concept. Always reaching for an essence, for conceptual and spatial clarity, in answer to the question, what makes a space resonate with those who inhabit it? Please join me in welcoming Ben Waechter.
Thank you, Yolanda. Thank you, Anne. So tonight I'll be showing you 6 projects, 3 earlier projects and 3 current projects. But before doing this, I need to get the slides to work. So let's see here. There we go. Okay, ready to go. So before going to the projects, I'd like to first describe our own process within our studio. And to begin with, our approach is experientially driven. And with this in mind, we spend a lot of time thinking about the specific characteristics of places that feel the best to be in. And as we've done this, we've noticed a lot of themes or a lot of characteristics of these types of places, these places that feel the best to be in. But what we've also found is that there's one theme that continually reemerges, and that theme is clarity. And so because of that, clarity's become this overarching goal in our work. And some examples. So clarity can happen in older cities, in this case, Ibn Tulun Mosque in Cairo. It can happen in newer cities, just had to put this image in for tonight, the grid of New York. It can happen in hill towns, this one, Civita, Italy. It can happen in alpine villages, Brin, Switzerland. And of course, it can happen in nature, this meadow in the Three Sisters Wilderness of Oregon. So clarity is really, it's a quality that transcends place, time, or style. So throughout our work, we've tried to achieve a similar sense of clarity, always looking for ways of getting closer to this quality. And as we've done this, we've noticed certain techniques and themes that seem to get us closer to these goals. Simple material palette, for example, or deploying materials strategically in a way that they support the spatial intent, or integrating building systems to the degree where they disappear and all you experience is space and materials. This one, integrating building materials or integrating building systems is still a challenge for us, but one of these days we'll get that completely. Ultimately going in the direction where buildings emerge anatomically with space, materials, and building systems considered equally and interwoven. So a few years ago, we embarked on an independent project to tease out and better understand some of these techniques that we were seeing. It was a bit of self-analysis, essentially gauging our success or a level of success at achieving clarity in 9 of our completed projects. And as we dug into this project, we saw a lot of techniques that were helping us, but there were 3 techniques that really seemed central. Techniques or themes that were present in all of our best work and not present in our less successful projects. And these 3 themes were conceptual clarity, spatial clarity, and compositional clarity. So we decided to focus the project on these 3 themes. And we also decided to do the project with physical models. 1, because we like how physical materials come with inherent abilities and constraints, and the simple act of thinking about how to put together materials could tell us something about clarity. And secondly, we like how physical models tell the truth, for better or worse. They let you know right away what's working or not working. And we thought it would be perfect for this type of a project. So this, is it getting cut off a little bit? It's okay. This image shows examples of our concept models. And we always knew that concepts were important for our practice, but one thing we learned through this process is that there was two ideas in generating a concept that were really important for our most successful projects. And those 2 things are one, that the really successful projects, the projects that feel the best to be in, were projects that had a concept that was a singular response that responded to all the criteria, or the major criteria of the project. So a singular response. The other part to this is that singular response for the best projects really brought an experiential identity to the project. So those 2 things, the singular response, and then that singular response brought an experiential identity. These are examples of our models that tested spatial clarity, and they're essentially cast figure ground models showing the main spaces as voids and the solid spaces as the support spaces or smaller spaces. And what we learned after doing these models is that the most successful projects, the projects that felt the best to be in, were ones that brought the secondary space forward, that really used it to define the main spaces in a more robust way. We also found that by doing that, by pulling it forward, it allowed these natural locations for mechanical systems, making that part of the project a lot easier instead of trying to shoehorn it in later. These are examples of our models testing compositional clarity. These are the most representational models, but they go a step further by pulling apart the outside of the building from the inside of the building. So at one moment you can see the exterior composition of the facade, as well as the internal three-dimensional organization of space and how they relate. And what we learned from these models is that the most successful projects were the ones that really distilled both the outside composition and inside composition down to its minimum, to the point where it was hard to imagine what could be added or what could be taken away. So with this clarity project in mind, I would like to go through 3 of the past projects that were part of that clarity project. First one is the Tower House. Tower House is located in the West Hills of Portland, Oregon. This is a neighborhood plan, and the neighborhood plan starts to show some of the constraints of the site. It's a steep site to begin with. You can see the contour lines there, but it's also a constricted site. There's a public stair coming up from below the curve of the street, and then there's also a large fir tree, all 3 of which constrict the street-facing property line more than by more than half. So it really was impossible to locate the house adjacent to the other houses on the street. And instead, we ended up placing the house lower down on the site on an area that was not exactly flat, but the least steep part of the site. We also decided to reduce the amount of site disturbance and expensive retaining walls to do a small footprint and build up rather than out. In this case, a 600 square foot footprint that went up 4 stories. This is a diagram going through the site. So the street is uphill from the site. And then the profile of the house. So essentially a tower house that's connected back to the street elevation with this 25-foot long bridge. So along with the site constraints, there was also budget constraints. And we decided, instead of spending the money equally across the entire house, that we would concentrate it on 3 main rooms and also the enclosure of the building. So our concept became this. This was the concept model, and became a tower house with 3 rooms. And in pushing the project or the design forward, we look back to the Scottish tower house, where there would be 1 main room per floor and then support rooms built into the thickened wall on the edge. We did a similar thing with this new tower house, placing stairs and bathrooms, closet space and mechanical areas in this thickened perimeter, and then carved it away at each of these main rooms into the loggia that you see there. Here are the cast models for the tower house. This is the lower level, which is the master bedroom. So it's sort of an upside down house. The second floor, which are the secondary bedrooms and laundry area and second bath. The third floor, which is the one that the bridge connects to, is sort of the hub of the house and is the kitchen and dining room. And finally, the top floor is the living room and roof. This is a cast model showing the section through the house with the 3 rooms. And then I'll quickly go through the floor plans. The lower floor plan, second, the dining room, living room, and then 3 study models made for the 3 rooms. And we made them large enough to be able to take a photograph inside. We added entourage and then the views, and then a similar model for upstairs with the living room. And then finally, the composition model showing the exterior with the interior. Side view of the house. The house is wrapped with a corrugated metal, and in order to eliminate the need for trim, we radius the corners so the corrugated metal wraps the corner. View from below, from the hillside, and then across the bridge. Then inside, this is inside the dining room and kitchen. A view out through the loggia, looking back down towards the city. This view is looking towards the stairs going upstairs. And this is the top floor of the living room, with frame views in 3 directions. So 2 towards the city and another one towards the city, then 1 back towards the forest or the hill. the master bedroom. Okay, the second project is the Z-Haus. The Z-Haus is located in Northeast Portland. It's in a neighborhood primarily made up of single-family detached houses, but it's also in a neighborhood where the city is encouraging higher density infill. In this case, what's regulated is 2 dwellings per what typically would be a single dwelling lot size. So the first challenge of the project was figuring out how to add a full-size house to a half-size lot without overwhelming the lot and also being able to tie into the adjacent neighboring houses. And so the first step was simply to attach the houses and then to align the front and the back of the house as a means to stitch together the streetscape and then also the backyardscape. But this meant, in order to get a full-size house, that it had to be tall. And so the second challenge or idea for the house was that we wanted to make a house that wasn't pancake, that wasn't separated from one floor to the next. And so we came up with this idea of using a split level and ultimately ended up with a scheme that was basically 6 rooms that were each offset by a half level. So from any one room, you could always view a half level up or a half level down. And this became our concept model for that house, which we called the zigzag house, and then it became the Z-Haus. This was definitely the most difficult concept model for us to build. This is a diagram showing the plan view on the left. So the 2 attached houses with a room on each side. There's a support core, and the support core houses all of the rooms that require plumbing and ventilation. So the kitchen and bathrooms, laundry room, mechanical room are all in the central core. On the right, you can see a schematic section with the 6 rooms and then entry. The lower 2 rooms, 1 and 2, one is the living room that's connected to the backyard. 2 is the dining room, sitting room that's on the kitchen level. And then the rest of the rooms above are meant to be bedrooms or flex spaces. So they could be 4 bedrooms, or it could be less bedrooms with different types of rooms. This is the cast figure ground model we did for the house, showing the core in the center. And I'll go through the plans quickly. The lower floor, the first and second floor with the kitchen showing up there in the core. And then a typical bedroom level with the bathroom in the middle. And instead of using regular doors for the bedrooms, we used these 8-foot wide wall panels so that they could be closed off for bedrooms, but they also could be opened up all the way for other types of rooms, office, or really anything. So the idea was for it to be flexible through these doors. And then the top level. And the composition model showing the 2 units attached in the middle. And then the facade. The idea with the facade was really to make it not look like 2 attached houses. So we used sort of an offset grid to make it, to sort of blur the line between a single house and 2 houses. It's a night view or dusk view of the house from the corner. It's a painted cedar siding. It's an image of the stairs. This photo is of the dining room looking into the kitchen, and here you can see how the stairs work, so you can view a half level up and then also a half level down. A view of the kitchen. This image is a glimpse into one of the bathrooms, and what we tried to do on this house is change the material palette from the main rooms, so those 6 offset rooms that all had oak flooring and drywall and painted white wood trim to change the material once you step into these smaller spaces. So the bathroom, in this case, is clad with a color integrated stucco, so on the walls and ceiling. These series show the sliding doors. So this is with the sliding door totally open, so halfway closed and all the way closed. And a view from the top level looking at the roofscape. Backyard. And then the front of the house during the day. And straight on, front house. The next project is Milwaukee Way. And Milwaukee Way is an office and retail building. It's a two-story building that's located in southeast Portland on a commercial spine. This is an image or a picture of the site before we started. It's a 1929 Spanish colonial revival style building that at the time had a restaurant on the ground floor and office space, office suites for lease on the second floor. And I guess I should note that even though it looks like it's a bit suburban, the street that we're looking at it's a commercial street. It's Milwaukee Avenue, so it was a bit odd. And the building is a bit odd on the street compared to other buildings, and so the owners came to us wanting to add 2 to 3 times the amount of leasable square footage to the project, and this really became the starting point of the design, how to add that much square footage without overwhelming this existing building, and also how to add that much retail space with a limited amount of street frontage. This building is placed pretty much at the center of this 100 by 100 corner lot, so we had little street frontage to work with. So the first part of the design was to bring the street into the site through the use of a pedestrian alleyway. You can sort of see the two black footprints being the new buildings. So the new alleyway added about 150 feet of additional store frontage, which was great. It also created a buffer between the existing building and the new building. And so that was working really well. We finally developed a scheme in a way that created a quiet backdrop for the existing building. So we envisioned the building as being a continuous grid of 6-foot openings, and before we actually figured out exactly what it would be, we envisioned it as this ribbon. So this ribbon of 6-foot wide openings that would be a quiet backdrop for the more ornate existing building. The figure ground model showing each of the buildings. There's 2 buildings. We placed the egress, stair, mechanical bathrooms, that type of thing in this core, which allowed the ends of the building to have exposed structure and to be more flexible. Site plan. Second floor plan. And then our composition model. Elevations. Then the photos. So this is an image. Well, you recognize the existing building. So this is standing on Milwaukee Avenue looking into the site. This is a picture looking into the alleyway. A detail. This image is inside the cafe that's on the corner. One of the retail spaces that's towards the back of the site. Another detail. And then this is from the window of one of the office space above. And then this overall picture gives you a sense of how it works. Okay, so now to the current projects. And so the current projects, we've tried to use the similar idea of clarity. We're exploring it in different ways. I think in the spirit of time management here, I will concentrate on the idea of each project, and then I'll go through the rest of the project fairly quickly. But the first one is Furioso Vineyards, which is located about an hour southwest of Portland in Oregon's Willamette Valley. The project was the renovation of an existing winery, plus the addition of a new tasting room, and new barrel storage, and then new exterior public space, and also production facilities. This is a picture taken of the vineyard from standing at the existing winery before we started. So it has really amazing views of the vineyard, but also of the valley beyond. It was definitely, well, it's definitely one of the big amenities of the site. This is a picture of what used to be the winery. So as you can see, a fairly utilitarian structure that just happens to be sitting on this perch, this ridge, overlooking this amazing view. This poor building, I'm pretty sure there wasn't a single window looking in the other direction when we started. So this was the building. There were a couple of big constraints that were design drivers of the project. One constraint was that this was the only location that we could do the new buildings on. So unlike other wineries that tend to separate production from hospitality, we had to do a building that where they could coexist together. So that was one challenge. The other challenge was that it wasn't possible to relocate this winery during construction. So we couldn't simply just demolish this building and start from scratch. We had to figure out a way to renovate around it. So with those things in mind, we came up with a concept or a strategy, an idea of having a room within the vineyard, basically a glass tasting room that's fully immersed in both the vineyard but also the production of the winery. On the left, you can see what used to be or the existing winery, shown in gray, and then it had the roof overhang towards the vineyard, and that was the crush pad. So on the right shows our strategy for organizing the spaces. We placed the tasting room towards the vineyard, and then between the tasting room and the winery, we placed what we call a loggia, but the loggia would become public space for most of the year, but then for the 2 weeks of harvest in the fall, it would become the crush pad. And then we placed mechanical towards the street, which is, of course, you can imagine the worst place to put mechanical, but was the only place to put it. So we have a strategy for that too. And then tying everything together is this large roof form that's you see dashed in. This shows the anatomy of the building. There's the large roof structure. It's an interesting roof. It's a 6-inch tall corrugated steel roof. So the last 4 feet of the roof cantilevers on its own. So no gutters and no substructure. And then below that, the existing winery and then also new components of the winery are clad with a charred cedar siding, a board and bat cedar siding that is board and bat on opaque walls. And then I mentioned that mechanical area in the front. It becomes a 2x2 cedar screen wall on street side hiding the mechanical area. And then there's a glass tasting room, which is a 14-foot tall curtain wall system. And then the concrete base, which houses the barrel storage, we call it the Piazza, which is seating for most of the year, but during harvest it's used for grape delivery, and bottle truck arrives on that Piazza. And then a ramp is built into the edge of the Piazza, which is sloped to accommodate forklift to access the barrel storage, which is below the tasting room. A plan of those components. A closer up plan of the tasting room. So the tasting room is completely surrounded with this 14-foot tall curtain wall system, and then support spaces are pulled into the middle, creating or subdividing that larger room into smaller rooms. We did a model of the tasting room, and similar to the tower house, we made it big enough to photograph inside, and we represented materials on the wall. In this case, the tasting room is, the walls and ceiling are clad with an acoustical panel that's fabric wrapped, and then a ground concrete floor. In a couple of sections, I guess one thing to note here is that because we like to hide ventilation in general, and also in this case it was particularly hard to have vents in the roof because of the tall corrugation, we placed all of the ventilation in this interstitial space between the body of the building and the roof. So the roof floats above the building for about 10 feet on the perimeter. This is a view standing in the vineyard looking back at the tasting room. So you can see the charred cedar siding above, and then you see the curtain wall, and then this roof. Another view on the vineyard side. This image is looking down into the tasting, it's of the tasting room, and then below that is the doors to the barrel storage. And you can see the roof, so that's the cantilevered portion of the roof. This shows the loggia that's used for public space during most of the year, and then for harvest it's used as a crush pad. Standing inside that loggia. And then this image is inside the tasting room. The fabric's really subtle, so this is probably the only image, if you can even see it on this, that there's a texture to it, so that's a fabric. And then a glimpse into the kitchen. This is the main part of the tasting room. Another part of the tasting room. And then this image is standing in that loggia looking back towards the tasting room. This shows there are some doors. Well, this shows the Piazza, and then there are some doors into the winery that are utility doors, and so we hid them, we sort of hid them in the screen. They open up like that. The Piazza, you can see the ramp on the left coming up. Here you can see the profile of the roof, and you can start to see the screen around the mechanical area a bit. Standing across the street, looking back at the building. And then the front view. So here you can see the lights hitting it in a way that you can start to see inside. So the idea is that the screened-in areas, it's opaque during the daytime, and then at night it's lit from within as to create a lantern effect or a beacon for the winery. A detail, that's the winemaker's I don't know if anybody remembers the original red building, but the window location pretty much stayed the same place. That was the winemaker's office. And so we added this aperture that's splayed out with the screen to that. It's a new window, but the original location of the window. A view inside the mechanical area, looking back out, you can see how the screen works. So it's that 2x2 charred cedar battens are attached to a steel structure. And then a detail of that screen and the roof. And then a night shot, the piazza, and then the lantern, which didn't actually end up as lantern-like as we had hoped, but it sort of works. The next project is Origami. Origami is back in Portland. We're in Northeast Portland. It's in a neighborhood not that different from the Z-Haus. It's in a neighborhood made up mainly of single-family detached houses, but also in one of these neighborhoods where the city is encouraging higher density infill. In this case, more density. It's 3 dwelling units per what would typically be a single dwelling lot. This is a site plan, so it's 12 attached fee simple row houses that, as you can see, take up half of a Portland city block. So this was really the first challenge: how to take this, large for its neighborhood building and fit in with the scale of the single family houses. The other challenge was budget. It had a fairly modest budget. In this case, it meant using hardy lap siding and composition shingles. So we couldn't rely on the materials to create shadow relief and texture. So it was really trying to find a way for the form of the building to give shadow relief and texture, but also to modulate it in a way that would fit into the neighboring houses. And we tried a bunch of different strategies until we finally tried a strategy of folding the roof and folding the walls in such a way that it ended up looking like origami. And it wasn't our original intention of having an origami building, but it looked like origami, and we liked how it looked. And so we even though it's a goofy name, we decided to keep, well, the name stuck. So it's the Origami project. This is the massing model. And I just saw Amy Sue in the audience. She built this model. She's now in New York, but she was in our office. This is a model of one of the units. So there are 3 types of units. This one is the most prevalent unit. We call it the courtyard unit. It has courtyards on the back side. The living is on the ground level. There's 2 bedrooms on the middle level, and then a master suite on the upper level. The floor plan of it. Images, renderings, and a construction photo. So it's getting close. It'll be complete next month. Detail photo. And then the courtyards in the back are built out of these, this ground concrete block wall. So there's a drive aisle in the back, there's a parking area, and then also a courtyard. Okay, the last project is the Society Hotel in Bingen, Washington. Bingen, Washington is located about an hour east of Portland in the historic Columbia River Gorge. It's a small town. Bingen is a small town. And the site is near the water, but it's also separated from the water by various industrial companies and then also the railroad. This is a view of the area. So it's hard to see the site, but it's just beyond. There's a gravel quarry in the foregrounds. It's just beyond that, and you can see the Columbia River in the background. Oregon's on the left-hand side of the river. Washington's on the right-hand side of the river. This is a site plan. So the site plan, well, the property was originally an elementary school built for Bingen in the 1930s. The buildings on the left are the original school building, so half of the project was adaptive reuse, and then the other half was new construction, and I'll show you images of the new construction project. The new construction is basically, there's two parts. One are 20 detached cabins that are all connected by a singular roof form, which is what you see. It's the ring that you see, and then within that ring is a spa building that has soaking pools and sauna and that type of thing. This is a plan showing how the cabins are detached. And then our idea for the project. The idea was really how to connect the hotel to the larger landscape while mitigating the industrial parts of the site. So essentially using the massing of the building to edit out that middle ground. So connecting the foreground of the hotel to the background of the Columbia River Gorge. Some renderings of this. Amy was involved with this project too. A view standing within that ring, and then a view of the spa building. We used another physical model to test the materials and spatial qualities of the spa building, like we did with the winery tasting room. This one, they keep getting more and more work goes into each of these models. But this one, we represent the materials, but also accessories like the handrail, and in this case, place the person inside of the photograph instead of photomontaging it later. Different views. And then this is an earlier shot of the construction showing the ring and the spa building in the middle. This is a photograph taken about a month ago. We had a big snowstorm in Oregon about a month ago, and it shows the siding on the buildings, and then also you can see the spa building in the middle. This is a view between two of the cabins looking back towards the river. And this is the final image. So thank you very much. Do I need to do anything?